Hello, welcome to episode 126 of the Craft House Magic podcast. My name's Ellie and I'm coming to you from Norwich in Norfolk in the UK, and today is the 30th of July, so welcome everybody. I hope you've all had a lovely crafty week since the last time I've spoken to you, and I'm here to share all the things that I've been making in the last 7 days. So today I have some knitting, I have some sewing, I have some embroidery to show you, and also a mystery craft, so I shall show you that in a little bit. I also have a couple of confessions. I have an Ask Me Anything question from the Ask Me Anything thread on the Ravelry group, and also some information on my shop update. Now this week the shop update is going to be the 1st of August at 7 PM British summertime. Because it's a special one, it's going to be all the advents for the Christmas period, and this year's theme is mistletoe kisses, so if you hang on till the end of the podcast I'll tell you a bit more about it. So you can find me on Instagram, Ravelry and Facebook as Craft House Magic, and I have my own website, crafthousemagik.co.uk, where you can find my handmade project bags, hand-dyed yarns, stitch markers, HiyaHiya knitting needles, and also fabric and bag making supplies too. So we have the summer sock along going on in the Ravelry group at the moment, so do come over and chat about what socks that you're making at the moment. It can be any adult size pattern, so do come and join us. So let's get into the good stuff, shall we? Straight into the knitting today. 2 finished objects to show you today. So, and Barbara is going to help me to show you my first one. So Barbara, would you like to come over? Thank you very much, Barbara. So Barbara is wearing my Waterlily top that has been on the needles for 2 years, and it's finally finished. Ta-da! I am so pleased with this. I didn't realise how well this sort of design suits me. So it's knitted from the bottom up, and you knit in the round up until under the armpit, and then split, and then knit the back and then the front part of the garment, and then it's kitchenered at the top of the shoulder just here. And I just like the way it forms a little sleeve, but you're still just knitting sort of in a straight line at the top there. But I really like just a little bit of a sleeve there. I think it looks quite flattering. And I love this lacy bit. Shall we lean you over, Barbara? So you can see that gorgeous, gorgeous lace. Absolutely love it. I'm so pleased I finally picked it up again to finish it off. This bit here is a Latvian braid, which was a little bit fiddly because I end up getting my yarns really twisted up, but do you know what, it's worth it. I think that really finishes the edge of the lace off nicely. I'll turn you around, Barbara, to show the back. And you can see that the back panel's also got lace in it, but it's got a straight neck rather than having a V-neck like the front is, and that's also got the Latvian braid. And I'd actually knitted right up to the top of here before I just put it down and just left the front. So I'd got, a couple of weeks ago I picked it up again, and I basically picked up just under the Latvian braid and knitted just this front panel. So it really hasn't taken me long, and it's well worth it. And actually I'd forgotten how much I love knitting lace. I totally forgot to say who has written the panel. So the Waterlily is by Maghan Fernandes, and I'll leave links to the patterns and yarns in the description bar below. So the yarn that I used for this is from Ginger Twist Studios, and it's the yakety yak base, which has got yak and silk in it, which is, it's such a lovely drape, and it also feels really light on as well, which I'm quite surprised about. I'm definitely going to use more luxurious yarns to make tops for myself because I just love it, absolutely love it. I haven't worn it like properly yet, but I've tried it on and pranced around in it. Before it was blocked, of course, but I will do some twirls in the garden so you can see what it looks like on me a little bit later, and pop it at the end of this section so that you can see what it looks like. The colourway that the yarn is in it might as well be spring, and it is actually still available on the Ginger Twist Studio website, so I'll leave a link to that down below as well. And I'd really recommend this yarn, it's absolutely gorgeous. Beautiful colour. I think the natural colour of the yak is that sort of grey background, and just the silk makes it drape so beautifully. Absolutely love it. So for this pattern I did make some modifications with the shaping in the waist and at the hips, so I decided in the end to do 2 lines of decreases at the back to sort of shape it in, rather than having the shaping at the sides or at the front so that you couldn't see it. But I am actually really pleased with the shape that it looks, and I have left some notes on my Ravelry page exactly what I've done, so if you do want to have a look at that, do check it out. I also did some bust shaping on this garment as well. I think you can see at the side, if I pull that forward a little bit, that there are some short row shaping lines. So about here I started to do some short rows at the front of the bodice so that there was more space to go around the bust area. So how I come to the conclusion of how many short rows to do, so I basically measured from the top of my shoulder to my back waist, and then the top of my shoulder to my front waist, and the number of inches difference was the depth that I needed to do my short rows. And I found that I needed to have 3 inches of short rows, so I basically just started doing short rows right in the side seams, and then I'd go 1 stitch shorter each side until I'd done 3 inches of depth, and then I started working in the round again. I hope that makes sense. It's actually quite simple to do bust shaping. At some point, if I do another top soon, what I want to do is perhaps do a little video tutorial to explain the bust shaping in a bit more in depth, but hopefully that makes sense to you now. But I absolutely love this top. The bottom hem has got some garter stitch edging on there, which I think is lovely. I did think that when I was trying it on before it had blocked, it was flipping up a little bit, but now I've blocked it, it's just draping really, really nicely, and I absolutely love it. With regard to the back, there was a lot of people on Ravelry that said that they found that this sort of gaped at the back a bit, but I got to the point where I was almost going to graft it together, and I thought, well, do I do some decreases like they suggested on the Ravelry pages? And I just thought, oh, I'm sure that's going to be all right, because I'm a bigger lady, I've probably got a fatter bit at the back of my neck there, so that probably makes a difference as well. Before I blocked it, this did flip up slightly, but now it's blocked, it sits nice and flat really nicely, this edging that you put on at the end. So I didn't do any additional decreases as a lot of people suggested. I just sort of stuck to the pattern, and I'm pleased I did, because it fits really well and I'm really happy with how it looks, and I'm very, very tempted to knit more of these. And I'm thinking, oh, I could do the same but some different lace patterns at the top, do all sorts of things. There's so many things that you could sort of adapt from this pattern and make a really nice collection of tops. I think that's really exciting. So there we go. Barbara, if you whip it off, I'll show everybody what it looks like close up. So I wanted to show you the shoulder seams. So they're Kitchener stitched together at the top of the lace, and I managed to get it so that both of the pieces of lace met, and they were both on the same row of the pattern, so it sort of mirrors quite nicely, I think. You can sort of just about see where it's joined, but I think the lace actually fits in together quite nicely because it was joined at the same row, rather than just keeping on knit until you've got a certain number of centimetres of work. I actually made sure that they finished on exactly the same place. I think I did possibly 1, 2, 2.5 repeats of the pattern, I think, but I kept knitting until it was the size that I wanted it to be. And I was just happened to be really close to the same row on both sides of lace, so I just thought if I get them to the same point they will match really nicely. So I'm really pleased about that. It's probably something that nobody else is going to notice, to be honest, but you know, I like it. I could possibly have done a 3-needle bind off, but I just thought actually because that lace met nicely, it's just going to mesh the knitting together so that you can't see where it's joined. Well, hopefully you can't see too much anyway. You can see that there's like a little tiny bit of a sleeve, and now I'm holding it out flat, you can see where those short rows are. So I started at the halfway point round the body to do these short rows. So I knitted to this end, then I went back to this side of the work, and then kept going side to side, taking in 1 stitch less, so that I ended up doing short rows so that they wedged to make a nice bust shape, so that it was not going to be shorter at the top and fits me really nicely. So I'm very excited to show you that. And this really goes with the other sewing item that I'm going to show you a little bit later on. So I might have to do some modelling of the 2 items worn together. I'm obviously in love with this colour. Right, so that's my first finished object to show you, but I do have two finished objects. Secondly, I have my Phobos scarf or wrap that, to be honest, I've done in a bit of collaboration with my mother-in-law Liz, and this is how it looks. I've completely finished it off now. So this looks a little bit different from the actual pattern, to be honest, because I made a few modifications. So there's a nice chevron pattern there, and my favourite bit is this square here. I just love that. But I have made some changes. So this is the Phobos pattern by Ysolda Teague, and that's how it looks there, because as you can see it's a square end to the original pattern. So this is the schematic diagram that they've got there, and I did see this because I bought this from Edinburgh Yarn Festival. I bought the yarn that it suggested in the panel, which I'll tell you about in a minute. But I just loved this square, but I wanted to modify it to get rid of these panels at the sides. So basically I've just knitted those two sections, so that's section A and section D, and actually made this longer to use up more of the yarn. So I started knitting the square bit to start Liz off, because she was a bit concerned about the way you sort of cast on, because it was a provisional cast on, and then what you do is you take those provisional stitches out and just draw those stitches together at the end, which is quite easy. But then Liz knitted most of this for me, and I decided that actually once she'd knitted the pattern repeats as it said in the pattern, it really wasn't long enough. I think it was about 1 metre, and there was so much yarn left, so I said keep repeating those pattern repeats that it described in the pattern, following on with the pattern of stitches by it was adding stitches here and there to continue so that the stripes get bigger, basically, if you can see. So those stripes of garter and stocking stitch get wider. And then Liz gave it back to me when she'd knitted up to this garter ridge here, and I still thought that I could get a little bit more length out of there, so I did another stocking stitch section. So there's an I-cord all the way down the side of the wrap, and that's sort of built into these rows across here. So I decided it'd be really nice to finish the top edges that would normally have some stitches filled in there into a square shape. I just decided to do an I-cord around those to finish them off, and I am really pleased with this. I much prefer it to the square edge that's in the original pattern. I just love the sort of pointy centre, and I'm really glad that I decided to make some changes to the pattern. So I ended up with 4.5 grams left out of 150 grams of yarn. It was called Deimos, and it's the 2018 Ysolda Club Special Edition yarn, and it's 100% wool heavy lace weight yarn, which is 80% Corriedale and 20% Zorballs yarn. So hopefully you'll be able to see the name, and that's what it looks like. And there was, let's see if it says, 750 metres in 150 grams, so I've used most of that yarn. And this yarn, even though it's sort of one of those rustic type yarns, it is really soft actually, so I'm really pleased with that, and I think that that'll be lovely against my neck. I think some of the shawls that I've made that are a little bit rustic, I have to be careful about not wearing them right next to my neck. But this one is really soft, but just look at that lovely diamond shape, love it. So I haven't actually tried this on yet, so I assume that I can sort of wear it doubled over like this. I always wear things very similarly really, so that's how long it is, even if with those extra stitches. If I doubled it round my neck, but of course I could just have it over the top and perhaps have the diamond a little bit lower. So there we go, another finished object off the needles. But I have a couple more things to show you. So I've been doing some work on my sock blank. So this is how much of the sock blank I have left. Ta-da! it looks like there's two ends here, but I've pulled the yarn initially from the sock blank on the wrong side, and then it kind of stops, it doesn't unravel properly and it gets stuck at the sides, and it just means that you've got the wrong end. Of course I always end up doing that, pulling the wrong end. But the other side comes off really freely, and I just love that, the feeling of the stitches unravelling. I've no idea why. If I'd have knitted that, if I'd have actually knitted this by hand, that would have given me feelings of shock and horror, but anyway, I digress. This is my first sock that I showed you last week. This is the Vanilla is the New Black sock pattern, and it's got a really nice heel shaping, and it's good for a high instep as well, so I do recommend that if you've got a high instep. And also it's quite a nice way of doing a heel really, because you're basically just working in the round, doing some increases and then doing a heel turn, which is just a lovely way of doing a sock. I have done this much of my second sock. Ta-da! And obviously because it's from a sock blank, the yarn is a bit wiggly. I forgot to say, I've dyed this sock blank, and I do have some in the shop if you are interested in getting hold of one. And I have got some more sock blanks in my stash, so I should get those out and get knitting with them, because it is fun to knit with the sock blank. And I suppose you could also sew things with the sock blank as well if you really wanted to. But there we are, that's how I'm getting on with my socks. Now, I haven't actually knitted on this project, but I've just dug it out to show you that I'm going to be ripping it out. I have told you about this ages ago and saying, oh yes, I'm going to rip it out, but I haven't quite yet. So these are the Way Through the Woods mittens by Erica Mount. And I knitted all this, most of the hand really, and then I decided, but that it is a little bit tight. I have a little bit of trouble getting my hand in, so I could do with going up a needle size, I think. And I think when I was working on it, I wasn't really enjoying knitting quite so tightly with colour work. So it's two colour work. There is a really cute Latvian braid on here though, which I think looks really nice. And I was moaning earlier about Latvian braids being a pain on my Waterlily in a straight line, but because this is sort of in a shorter round, it is easier to cope with. So I wouldn't mind doing that Latvian braid again, but isn't that pretty with the two colours? But there we go, I'm going to pick these up again and start from the beginning and have a nice pair of mittens for winter. It's a little bit summery to be knitting something like this, but you know, this is actually my oldest whip now on the needles. I only have my blankets, I think, and my socks that I haven't cast on that long ago. So I'm being really good, and if I finish these, then I can just knit whatever I like. I can go crazy. I feel like I shouldn't be having things on the needles for too long. Oh, I should tell you exactly what the yarns were that I'm knitting these mittens with. So they're Blacker Yarns, Jacob in the 4-ply base, pale green clay and dark blue clay. They're really nice colours if you look closely at them. So yes, I'm going to get that unravelled and get those started again. And I've been saying this for ages, but I am now, because that's the only thing that I've got on my needles that's sort of a complicated knit. So that's all my knitting I've got to show you today. Hopefully I'll have some exciting cast on by next week to show you. So let's get on with the sewing. So I have some dressmaking to show you. So Barbara, would you like to come over again? She's working a bit hard today, bless her. Thank you so much, Barbara. Now Barbara is wearing my new penny dress. So last week I showed you that I'd sewn up a blouse version just to check the fit across the top here, because I was a bit worried with it being sort of a short grown on sleeve. I was worried it was going to be baggy here, but actually it's really clever because there's panels at the top there that have some gathering which have enough fabric for the bust area. So I'm really pleased with how that fitted. So I went ahead and sewed the full dress version. This fabric is some gorgeous Lady McElroy lawn in a hydrangea fabric, and I picked this up in 2 years ago, I think, at the Festival of Quilts. But I know they still sell it. I know that they've still got it on Minerva, for instance, because I did see it the other day. I will link the Minerva link down below because I can't remember which shop I got this from the Festival of Quilts, but at least you'll be able to find it if you're looking for it. It's a really lovely quality cotton lawn fabric, and it's going to be ideal for going out for tea with. So I've got to get myself a nice belt, I think, to go with it. So the penny dress is a pattern by Sew Over It, and the pattern goes up to size 20, and I'm just over that size, so I have graded it out a little bit, and I have got a Sew Over It Eve dress as well, and I did grade up a size for this one as well. But I know that the newer patterns, they're actually going up to size 30, so that's absolutely brilliant. When I was grading my sizes, I ended up using a size 12 on the shoulders because I compared it to a block that I drafted out, and I knew what size to sort of look for then. And then I used, I think, obviously it's about a size 22-ish at the sides because I have graded it out from the largest size, which is a size 20. I also increased the front bodice by 1 inch to give a little bit of room for the bust area as well, because I did hear that it comes up quite high, but actually I think I could have probably done with another inch. It doesn't look bad at all, but I think that extra inch would have balanced it out so that the front and the back waistbands were exactly parallel to the ground. But I really like it anyway. When I did the blouse with the ties, I couldn't tell as much that I needed that extra inch at the front because I'd already added 5 centimetres down of the whole bodice, and then obviously the ties at the front. The rest of it though I think fits really well, and I'm so pleased with it. It has got a half circle skirt on the bottom, which you can't really see here, but I will take some twirls in the garden so you can see my full length wear in it. I did let the dress drop for a week just in case the hem needed evening out, but it was absolutely fine, which is brilliant because I hate evening out hems. I've not actually done a cotton lawn dress before, so I didn't know how well it would cope with having to let the hem drop for a week, and it didn't drop at all, so I'm really pleased about that. I am very tempted to make some shirts that aren't tied at the front but just longer with this pattern, and actually if I add some ties at the side seams just to pull in the waist a little bit, I think that'll be absolutely gorgeous. So I'm going to play around with this pattern quite a bit, but I'm sure I'll be making some more full-length dresses as well. There is a little issue with the sort of side seam. So when you're assembling this top, what you're supposed to do is overlock the side seams of the bodice once you've joined the shoulders together, and then snip in 1.5 centimetres where the seam allowance is, so that you can then fold the seam allowance for the sleeve in, top stitch that down, and then sew this down the side. And I don't really like this method of construction, to be honest. I have done a zigzag stitch over those seams so that, because actually once you've snipped them there's a little bit of raw edge just showing there. So after I assembled the sleeve and the side seam, I then zigzag stitched over those raw edges so that they don't sort of come undone. But I did speak to somebody else on the internet about how they'd made a couple of these dresses and it's actually come unravelled under the sleeve. So I think what I might do is just increase the length of the sleeve a bit and have a bit of a more of a grown on sleeve rather than it just being a straight line, and then I won't have that issue of it coming undone at all. I did actually drop the armhole marking where you're supposed to stitch up to, and I dropped it by 1 centimetre because the first one I made was a little bit on the tight side, but I think if I made another one I'd definitely modify it just to have those grown on sleeves. So I think I'd probably add sort of 1 centimetre or 2 onto the sleeve and have the side seam scooping out so that the actual sleeve is separate from the main body, and it will make the sleeve very slightly longer, but I think that'll be fine. It's not mega long at the moment, so I think that'll work out lovely. It's got some elastic around the waist which cinches you in a little bit, really nice and comfortable, and a lovely floaty half circle skirt, so I'm really pleased with that. So thank you very much, Barbara. So I just thought I'd show you the inside of the shirt. Again, this is the same sort of construction as the shirt I made last week, because obviously it's the same pattern. There is facing on the inside there, which is stitched down and secured nicely. And then again, I did the modification in that I actually stitched in the ditch on the front of the placket here to make sure that that facing was completely sort of enclosed. So here's a close-up of where I've zigzag stitched those raw seams that I've snipped and turned in there. You can see what I mean with it being more prone to sort of fraying and not lasting as long. So I do like the style of it like that, but I think it would last longer if the sleeve was slightly modified. I really like the collar. I think that looks lovely. When I did make up the collar, what I tend to do is with the under collar and the back piece of the collar, I trim 1/8 of an inch off the collar edges so that when you sew it together it always turns over to the underside of the collar, so that you don't have the underside of the collar coming out to the top side of the collar, if that makes sense. And the colour goes perfectly with my new Waterlily top, so absolute perfect timing. So there we go, that's my dressmaking for this week. So now it's my embroidery section. So I've started another one of my Make 9 projects, and this is actually going to be a clock face for a clock that we've got in our living room. It's one that I've picked up from a charity shop, and I thought, you can actually take the sort of background of the clock out and I can replace it with some embroidery, I thought. So this is going to be a wreath pattern with some flowers, and so far I have quite a well, I've done all the sort of teal coloured leaves, and I'm going to be adding some lovely flowers and some stems in there to sort of finish it off. But to be honest, this was pretty quick. So the pattern is a Diane Vingert pattern, and she's got a YouTube channel where she has lots of videos on how to make embroideries like this one. This one was actually a free pattern that she's got on her website. I shall leave a link to the video and the free pattern as well, that shows you step by step of what to do. And she's got loads of other paid for patterns on there, which I'm going to have to try because they're wonderful. But this one particularly caught my eye, not just because it's free, but just because I really liked the sort of colours that she used. I've not used exactly the same colours because I'm using up what threads I already have in my stash. Yeah. But I'm definitely going to do another one of her patterns again. She sells her patterns as sort of beginner friendly, which I think is really good. And actually all of the embroidery is stitched with 6 threads, which is the full embroidery floss, so it makes it so much quicker. And I think it makes a lovely texture too, so I'm really excited to finish this one. The lovely little needle minder I got from Cheryl at Chapelview Crafts, and I'll leave a link to her shop as well. Let's just get in close so that you can see the embroidery a little bit better. So I've used 2 colours of a sort of greeny teal colour for the leaves there. And in her original version there was some white flowers in there and some green, but I think I'm going to include a couple more blues as well, so it goes in with my colour scheme in my living room. So those are the 2 colours I've been using for the leaves, and then I thought the couple of blues and a creamy colour for the flowers, and then I've got some dark brown and some green to do the little bits in between, and I thought that that colour scheme would go wonderfully with our lounge. So I hopefully get loads done at the weekend so I can show you a bit more progress on that. So I'm working on some linen here that I picked up from an Etsy shop called Find Fabrics, and this is a 50% cotton, 50% linen mix, and I just thought that that was a lovely shade. I think it was the natural one that I bought from Find Fabrics, but I'm really pleased with it, and I think that'll make a lovely addition to my sort of lounge. So now I have my mystery craft to show you. Which is slightly random, although it is to do with fabric, so it's still still something to show on the podcast. So I've been using some wax food wraps from a shop called the beeswax wrap coat that I bought for Christmas, and I thought I could make some of these, that might be quite fun. And I found a tutorial on YouTube which shows you exactly how to do it, and you actually just did it on a baking tray with some beeswax pellets, just place them on top of the fabric and put it in the oven at about 170 degrees Celsius. I just literally sat by the oven and watched it melt, whip them out and get the fork, lift them up and sort of wave it around till it cools down. On the video tutorial that I found, which I'll leave a link to in the down bar, she said that, oh, it dries in a few seconds. For me, it didn't. Maybe I had it too hot on the oven, but it just took me sort of 30 seconds for it to dry, so you had to be careful not to touch it with your fingers until it cooled down a little bit more. She didn't actually tell you what temperature to do the oven, so she said a medium to high heat, so I assumed that sort of 170 would be about right, but they worked out fine, so that's okay. I shall show you what I come up with. So I found some fabric in my stash that I thought looked very sort of vintage kitchen, so I picked some of these out. I've got some smaller ones, and these are all waxy now because you can see how stiff they are. I think this was my favourite sort of print. This reminds me of a proper vintage kitchen feel, and it's really stiff with the wax now, and I've started to use them, and they're similar to the beeswax coat ones, so I'm pleased about that. I bought my beeswax as a food grade beeswax off eBay. I'm not quite sure if that's the best one to get, but that's the one I purchased, and I'll leave a link to the one I bought in the down bar below as well. You might be able to find better kits online, but that's just something I picked up. I think I got 500 grams for about £10, and I've got loads of fabric in my stash, so I thought I'll just make some of my own. I did wash the fabric before I put the wax on them so that they'd be nice and clean without softener. But I've got a variety of different sizes now, so I'm really pleased with those. So I hope that inspires you to make some as well, because it does save on cling film and things, and I just think it's quite nice to use some nice fabrics in the kitchen as well, in your everyday sort of life. So there we go, that's my sort of mystery craft for this week. And I have got some confessions. Now, I can't actually show you these things because they are PDF patterns that I've bought, but I thought I'd mention that I've purchased them. So I'm basically blaming this on Lindsay from the Stitch Create Love podcast. She made me become a Sew Over It PDF club member because she told me about this pattern that they brought out, which I can't show you because it's a secret. I believe that they are doing a sew along on the 4th of August about this pattern, and it's called the Maisie dress, but it's a lovely pattern, so I can't show you a picture of that one. So I purchased the Maisie dress, and it is basically, it's got a half circle skirt in it, and it's very nice, so keep an eye out. Well worth joining the PDF club just to get things, just to get this information early, because it's very exciting. But because I joined the PDF club, I got a free pattern which was the Georgie dress, and I'll pop a picture up here so that you can see what that looks like. And it's basically a jersey dress that's a sort of wrap top, a little bit like this dress, my Eve dress, but I just thought it'd be nice to have a version that's in a stretch fabric as well. And the sizes now go up to a size 30, so you get the patterns from I think a size 6 or 8 right up to a size 30 with Sew Over It now, so I'm really pleased that they've done that, and I will be enjoying not having to add that extra size on the size 20 that I normally have to do, so I'm really pleased with that. I'm normally quite good at staying a member of the PDF club with Sew Over It, but it lapsed this year and I just completely forgot about it. But basically it's your fault, Lindsay. So there we are, that's my little bit of treating myself this week. Probably treat myself a little bit too often, but do you know what? I love it. So now we've got the question from the Ask Me Anything thread. So Sarah was asking me about overlock threads. She's about to get a new overlocker. And where do I get my overlock threads from, and what colours do I have? Do I buy a colour for each garment? So the threads that I use are basically cheap polyester threads, because to be honest, with an overlocker, it can cope with those sort of inconsistencies in thickness, so it doesn't get sort of stuck or anything. And like my standard sewing machine, sometimes it doesn't like particular makes of thread, but you can just about get away with, as long as it's not really cheap. I tend to go for something like a Moon thread. They're quite good. They do the little 1,000-metre little reels that seem to go a reasonably long way, but I then sometimes buy the big reel that I get from my local fabric shop, really, and they're not very expensive, but the machine can cope with it, and you use a lot of thread on the overlocker, so I think that purchasing some big reels is really useful, really. I have tried woolly nylon and things, but I just don't like it very much. It's supposed to be sort of stretchier and things, but I just don't like threading it through the machine. It's awful. To be honest, it might be because I've bought a cheap version of woolly nylon and had a go with it, but I just don't like it. I just stick to the polyester threads. The ones I get from my normal fabric shop, my local fabric shop, they normally come about £3 each, I think. So to have 4 of those, and to have those in the basic colours, so white, cream, black, grey, navy and a mid blue, I tend to use quite a lot. It might be because I sew with a lot of blue fabrics. It's up to you the additional ones you add there, but I think that the standard sort of colours that blend in with a lot of fabrics, they'll probably be enough. And a lot of the time I tend to just use, so what thread have I used? See, I've used grey on this one just because it toned in with it enough, and with it being a woven fabric, I didn't have to actually sew the seams with the overlocker, or they're just to finish the seams off after I've sewn them on the sewing machine. So it's really up to you. If you want to be really fussy, you can do. I think to start with, when I used it, I used to think, oh, I've got to have the right colour exactly to match, but it depends on how much that thread is going to show. If it's a jersey fabric, I try and get the closest match that I possibly can, because that is more likely to show with it actually sewing the seam itself. So I think that's it. I feel like I've waffled on answering that question, but it's a very good question, and good luck with your overlocker, Sarah. So last but not least, I have my shop update section, and I'm introducing some exciting advent calendars, which I'm really excited about. Now, I've painted this picture, so I was trying to look for a picture on the internet that sort of represented my idea of my Mistletoe Kisses advent calendar, and I just couldn't find a picture, so I decided to paint it myself. So this is what I've painted. It's upside down for a start. It's a very simple representation of some mistletoe. So the idea is that the mistletoe kisses are kisses under the mistletoe from years gone by, where you've had that, your heart skipping a beat, where you've had that spark of joy that's made you happy, and I want to have that in a little parcel every day during Advent. So that's what I've called the Advent, and I've painted this picture, which isn't particularly good, but there we go. Anyway, so what I've tried to do with the Advent is make it accessible to all different budgets, so you can actually purchase 10-gram minis for 12 days of Christmas, or 24-day Advent, but also the 20-gram minis for 12 days of Christmas and the 24 Advent. So there's 4 different sizes you can choose from, but also I decided to make it so that you can choose between the stellina, merino and stellina base, or the merino and nylon base, so that if you wanted a little bit of sparkle this Christmas, well, then all the minis will be sparkly too. Now, I love sparkliness, so I could have had all the Advents in sparkle, but just in case you're not keen on the sparkly stellina, I've included the merino as well. So there'll be individually wrapped parcels for whichever amount of days or grams that you wanted. So you're having 10 grams or 20 grams, and 12 days or 24 days. So there's 4 different options there. There is an option to add a full skein as well for a sort of a Christmas Day treat, or if you want to, you can open it early. So there's an option for that as well, so you don't have to have it. So there's lots of different price ranges for you. So in addition to the minis that are individually wrapped, you'll get a few little extras in there which are a surprise, but also you'll be getting my new wrap pattern. It's a knitted wrap, and you'll need at least 240 grams of yarn. So if you're purchasing the 10 grams for 24 days, the 20 grams for 12 days, or the 20 grams for 24 days, you'll have enough. But if you're purchasing the 10 grams for 12 days, you'll only have 120 grams of yarn in total, so you'll need to add some of your own yarn to make up that pattern if you want to knit that pattern, of course, but you will get it with the advent as well. And then whether you buy the full scale of yarn for Christmas Day, it doesn't make any difference, you'll still get that wrap pattern as well. So at the moment I'm working on a sample piece, and then I'm going to send it to test knitters, so it is coming along nicely, and I think I'm going to keep it as a secret till the end of November. And people that have purchased the advent calendars will have an email through with the pattern at the end of November, ready for you to start it in advent. So I thought that'd be lovely to have something that you're going to be knitting with those minis that you're opening every day. In terms of the colours, I'm going to stick to mid-tones and lighter colours, but I'm actually going to do a gradient. Because you're having the wrap pattern, I thought it'd be lovely to have the gradient go across that wrap, and it'll go really nicely together, I think. So that's the advent, but I've also decided to do the same theme, the Mistletoe Kisses theme, for a bag and yarn set, which will also come with a free sock pattern. So the Mistletoe Kisses bag will be a mystery, well obviously it'll have mistletoe on but you won't have seen exactly what it looks like yet, but it'll be a free motion applique bag in my medium size bag. You'll get a full skein of yarn and a 20 gram mini with it, but also the sock pattern, and the sock pattern is going to be a mystery as well until I release it at the end of November. Again, the same as the wrap pattern that I was talking about. Just remember, you won't get the pattern until the end of November, so that everyone sort of starts it together. So I'll do a thread in the Ravelry group for knitting along with the wrap pattern and the sock pattern at the same time, and I'll be drawing for prizes from those as well. So I just thought it's quite a nice having a sense of community with us making things along at the same time. So the patterns that I've been talking about, the sock pattern and the wrap pattern, are going to be a surprise until the end of November. So the shop update will be Saturday the 1st of August at 7 PM British Summer Time. I will have the advents available as well as the sock kits. So the advents again will be the yarn, the wrap pattern, and the option of having an additional skein for Christmas Day. And then the sock kit will include the bag, the yarn and the sock pattern. So there's two options that you can go for. If you want to go for them both, the yarn for Christmas Day and the yarn for the sock will be different. So if you did want to go for the two kits, you can, and you won't have any duplicates. So I hope you enjoyed the podcast. Thank you so much for watching and sticking till the end, till I keep waffling and waffling and waffling. I hope you have a lovely crafty week, and I shall speak to you later. Bye!